next up, we have not one, but two Lightning Talk presenters. Aliya Bhatia, Senior Policy Analyst for the Free Expression Project, and Dhanaraj Thakur, the Research Director for both from the Center for Democracy and Technology. And they are giving a talk entitled Interrogating and Improving Content Moderation for Indigenous and Low-Resource Languages in the Global South.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So, I'll let you know this, but this might be interesting to everyone else. We at CDT recently completed a multi-year research project focused on content moderation in the Global South. I think most of us know that the reality is that when it comes to content moderation, our knowledge about it is often based on experiences and lessons and research based on trust and safety around user-generated content in the US, EU, and other Western countries. But we also, I think, will agree that it's important for a content moderation system to treat users equitably across languages. So the question that we asked in this project is, how do content moderation systems work for low-resource and indigenous languages around the world? And by low-resource languages, I mean specifically languages for which there is very few data sets available to train these models, even if those languages themselves have millions, tens of millions, or hundreds of millions of speakers.
So poor moderation in low-resource languages has resulted in dire consequences around the world, particularly in the Global South. As many of you know, instances of real-world violence trickling down from online content in places like Ethiopia and Myanmar. And so we really wanted to understand and look under the hood of how content moderation occurs in these languages. And for our case studies, we looked at Maghrebi Arabic, Kiswahili, Tamil, and Quechua, covering most of the Global South and sort of hundreds of millions of users. And I'll note Quechua was the indigenous language we looked at in this project.
Right. And the way we did this was we surveyed users, social media users across these four language case studies. We conducted interviews with trust and safety professionals, digital rights activists, linguistics activists, and content creators and social influencers working in these languages. And we also had roundtables with various NLP researchers and LLM developers also developed language technologies for these technologies for these languages. So the scale of the project was quite large, as you can imagine. There are many findings that came out, but Aliya, what do you think were some of the key ones that struck you?
Yeah, so there were so many findings, as you can imagine. But I think number one that was really interesting is that users in the majority world, in the Global South that we studied, are using social media in really sophisticated ways and speaking in really complex ways that are often not represented in the data sets or lexicons that sort of inform moderation. They're using transliteration of their languages, so either using Romanized script or letters or numerals to write their language. They're writing bilingually, trilingually, and like English, often code mixing or using a lot of coded in-group language. And sometimes they do that out of necessity because they don't have access to keyboards, or the platforms don't sort of host their language. But also many do it to evade existing content filters or moderation filters. And then the second really big finding I thought was that users experienced inconsistent moderation in droves. At once, they sort of experience a majority of users in the Tamil case study, but a significant number in a lot of case studies experienced moderation, over-moderation, removal of their content that was unexplained, and at the same time experienced under-moderation, encountering harassment or hate speech in droves.
Yeah, very interesting. For me, I thought were the two things. One was one of the findings that we found, one of the patterns that we found across, what's the next slide? One of the patterns we've found across case studies was that the social media companies often took, in most cases, two general approaches to how they approach content moderation. One was this kind of what we dubbed a global approach, where they took a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to content policies, and apply that across the board, with some exceptions to like crises or elections or so on. And then another approach, which was what we dubbed local, which is adopted by TikTok in many cases, was a modification of these concept policies based on local laws and cultural nuances. I think another important issue was how there was a lot of activity, particularly by LLM developers and researchers in these various regions to kind of develop technologies, but to also address many of the problems that we ourselves are finding. But there's this disconnect between them and social media companies. There's essentially, in many cases, these companies are ignorant of these efforts.
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of recommendations in this work. I'll just cover two. One is that we need models to be trained on representative data. Obviously, Wikipedia is a big source of training data for existing approaches, but we need data that training data sets that represent how people speak online. And a lot of the NLP experts we spoke with said that smaller models might actually prove more useful and effective in performing in low resource languages, those languages without a lot of data. And then the second is that user behavior often is a really useful signal to show where moderation can be improved or where additional investment is needed. And so we sort of call for trust and safety folks to look at where users are moving or where users are reporting content as a signal for additional attention.
And then we can end with this, I think we can end with the last quote here, which is really this kind of expression that we came across over and over, which really goes to this point about people should not have unfair experiences on social media because of the languages they choose to post in, which often in the cases that we came across happen to be low resource and indigenous languages. So thank you.
Thank you.